couple of things I just wanted to say before so we are sponsoring this session with Steelcase that's going to talk about their journey and experience transitioning through the SDDC or software-defined data center transformation. So it's a great way for you to interact, exchange, and understand what that journey looks like for an early adopter. And they started this journey in 2014 and got there by about the late 2015. So I think it's one of the earlier adopters in the Fortune 1000 space. So a quick plug for Pluribus. We've been around for 6 years. We have 130 employees. We have deployments across 20 countries, 100 plus customers. Basically, we are one of the disruptors in the software-defined networking space, a hyper-converged operating system that runs on ONI OCP switches and really helps you define business value in your data center infrastructure as you look into the future. Okay? So we have a booth there. You can certainly come there and get a little insight of how we put things together and how we really disrupt the ecosystem. 3 things. Our approach basically converts, we think of the network exactly the way VMware thinks of compute. So we have disrupted the networking infrastructure and the technology architecture, virtualized it, converted it into a fabric, and deliver a number of services software-defined from the fabric that are very relevant for customers transitioning to the cloud, mobility, security, and so forth. Okay? A lot of key partnerships, as you all know in this business. Without partnerships, you cannot make much progress in this new world. So there are some very important partnerships here tied to Ericsson, Dell, TIBCO, Nutanix, Red Hat, Nexenta. So we can share more about it in another conversation. A lot of customers we have, as I said, we are deployed globally, worldwide, in mission-critical or business-relevant environments, and it kind of gives you a flavor of the amount of commitment we have, both from the customer community. Some of you in this room are customers as well, and really taking this journey forward. So on that note, I'm going to pass the baton to Matt here to share his experience with Pluribus and SDDC.
Thanks, Kumar. Appreciate it. So my name is Matthew Bielecki. I'm a network engineer for Steelcase Incorporated. I've been a network engineer for about 15 years, the last 8.5 at Steelcase. So I've been doing this a little bit a while. For the past 2 years, we've actually gone down 2 different SDN paths. 2 years ago, we started SDN WAN. So we have that deployed at about 30 different sites around the world. And of course, with Pluribus, we have SDN in the data center. So we're going to talk about SDN in the data center, but first a little bit about Steelcase. Steelcase has been around over 100 years. We manufacture different office furniture for corporations, healthcare, and educational markets. We make things like desks, chairs, cubicles, walls, floors, that sort of thing. Now we're headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We have a little bit over 100 sites worldwide in about 15 to 20 different countries. And pertinent to this talk, we have an active data center pair in Grand Rapids. So 2 separate locations connected with private dark fiber. One little interesting part about Steelcase is that since we're in New York, when the Empire State Building was first developed, Steelcase outfitted the entire building. So we had months and months and months worth of Steelcase trucks delivering furniture nonstop, 24 hours a day to that building. We also make integrated technology products. This is becoming more and more a focus of Steelcase. We have workstations where you can share your screen with a close group of people. We also have that little device on the right that integrates with Microsoft Exchange to show visibly whether or not a conference room is available or booked. When we first got into SDN a couple years ago, it was hard for a network engineer to understand what SDN even was. There's a lot of different definitions being floated around, kind of like cloud is now. What does it mean? How is it applicable to the enterprise? But really the bottom line for us was that, as you've heard all morning so far, is driving the value into the software and away from the hardware. So commoditizing the hardware, driving the cost down in the hardware, maybe even be hardware agnostic, but really adding value into the software. It provides several different values. One is rapid feature development. Another one, rapid bug fixes. So we don't necessarily have to replace a whole chassis or a whole line card to get a new feature or to fix a bug. Hopefully that's the idea. So far, that's been our experience so far. And as you've heard, networking has finally taken the path that servers took. We're just about 10 to 15 years late. For our use case, there's several things going on in Steelcase when we started looking at SDN. We're in the process of evaluating a brand new data center solution in the typical 3-layer model. At that time, we were interested in moving out of our current data center into a new data center, and this was actually one of our buildings at the time, called it the Pyramid, strangely enough. In the bottom of that pyramid was one of our active data centers. We sold the Pyramid to a different company, so we had to get out in an actual short time frame. 6 months is all we had to move. Another issue we were trying to solve is that we had an old DMZ. So the switching in our DMZ at the time was about 10 years old. So we knew we had to do something there. We were also out of 10 gig capacity, and our server team was constantly coming to us, asking us for more 10 gig ports. So all those things mixed together, we knew we had to do something and had to do something quick in that space. So as we were evaluating that one particular solution, we were introduced to Pluribus. Actually, our old Riverbed account team had gone to Pluribus and made a cold call on us and said, hey, we have this new product we'd like to take a look at. So we did. So what I'm showing here is a timeline and a thought process that we went through to get to the end stage we're at now. So the top is really beginning to end 1 year from being even introduced to Pluribus to the time we made a final decision to go with an SDN rather than our old traditional networking model. There are several reasons for that. I list them here. But we tried to make a methodical approach to taking this decision. We went through a couple small proof of concepts, some design sessions I will talk about in a minute, and then finally at the end, make the decision on which one to go to. Some of the different features we're looking at the time and that are really relevant here are analytics. What kind of analytics could we pull out of the network? This has been a big theme again this morning, and now you can see it in a real use case in an enterprise situation. Is that we'd have our server customers come up and say, SAP took a hiccup 2 days ago at 11:09 p.m. What happened? And of course we could say, well, we have no idea. We can't go back and look at that one particular transaction or anything. With the Pluribus solution, we've had that happen since, and we can go back and we can look back in time at a particular session, look at the protocol it used, the latency in that one session, how much data was trafficked across that one session from where to where historically. So really huge leap forward for us in visibility. Another big thing is that the Pluribus system is a distributed operating system. So every node makes up a fabric, one big fabric, and all those nodes know about each other. They know the MAC address tables, they know the ARP tables, so they're constantly sharing information. That one fabric is what allows us to pull out the visibility statistics from the system. It's different than a controller-based system, right? There's no separate controller. It's just any node in the fabric you can go to, you can pull out the stats, and it constantly talks to the other nodes. There's no shipping to a separate controller, which was really intriguing to us. So I'm going to go over just a couple quick high-level diagrams of what our network looked like and looks like now. So we had this really standard logical design, logical modular campus design, where we had a core, a set of switches that ran the core, and then each of these other bubbles represent a different part of the network. So WAN, DMZ, campus, etc. Each one of those bubbles had separate hardware associated to it. So we physically separated the network into these different modules. After Pluribus, here's what it looks like. Almost exactly the same. But it's on virtual hardware. So we can plug and play different 2U form factor switches in and out. No custom hardware, no chassis, nothing else. But we're able to migrate our existing design at the time onto the new hardware. That added a big level of comfort for us. This is like I had up in the first slide, it's a brave new world. It's scary to step into this kind of drastically different way of thinking, especially in a really conservative manufacturing enterprise network. So it was really a big leap. So any bit of comfort we could find, we definitely took it. Here I'm showing one of the switches that we have, a 2U switch, the F64, and just want to represent that, like I said, it's one big fabric, so any device can connect to any switch port and be assigned to any one of those zones or those modules that I showed on in the previous bubbles. So if you have a WAN router you want to plug in, you just assign the port to the WAN module. If you have a server you want to plug in, can plug into the same switch, just assign it to the server zone. There are SFP-based switches, so you can use copper, fiber, whatever you want. 1 gig, 10 gig, 40 gig. From a physical standpoint, here's what we have. We have both data centers represented here. The left-hand side is our headquarters data center. The right-hand side was our old Pyramid data center. So we can see we mirror the network between the data centers. The top layer is a core layer, does a core routing. Kind of the middle two switches there are spines, and then the bottom set of switches are leafs. Or you can think of it as an access layer. Just showing here that you can connect servers redundantly to different leaf clusters. You can connect multi-vendor switches to this network. It doesn't all have to be Pluribus if you don't want. And to look at the routing diagram, a simplified routing diagram, it's the same thing. So I just show the top two layers. Two main core routers that have no OSPF relationship, paired with the spine layer that has several virtual routers. So each side has 7 virtual routers. Again, it's simple. If you think about standard networking design, it's just OSPF relationships. For routing redundancy, it's just between the spines. So we add VRRP, so it's active VRP. If there's a failure of one spine, all the routing fails over to the other spine. But again, we've taken 14 routers now and put them on 2 physical switches. One of the use cases that we talked about was moving this data center, or interconnecting data centers. So if we simplify the physical diagram here, we have, again, both data centers, or 2 data centers shown here. Core on the top, spines in the middle, and then leafs on the bottom. To add a third data center with our previous infrastructure would have been extremely complex, maybe even exponentially more complex. To be able to keep the same VLANs throughout the VLANs, or throughout the 3 data centers, and keep the same routing scheme, same subnets. But with the Pluribus solution, all we had to do was add a leaf switch into that third data center. There's no extra logic. It's just adding more switch ports. So from our standpoint, this is a gigantic benefit to us. And if you want to add a 4th data center to be the same thing, you just add another leaf and physically connect it into the spines, and you've connected 4 data centers all together. A really huge benefit to us. The final physical diagram looks like this. To add more switch ports, we just add more leafs. And this is what we ended up with. This is our total data center network in 2 different data centers. Very simplified, very easy to troubleshoot network. A big part of making a huge jump from one network architecture to SDN is to try to take the emotion out of the decision-making process. We are really ingrained with the incumbent that it's really hard to think of reasons to move away from them. We really want to be comfortable. Our executives always want to make sure the network is always up and running, don't ever have an outage, things like that. So we're really terrified to think of going to something new, but we knew we had to. So we actually made a list of about 25 different points. I've narrowed it down here just in a summary, but are the typical things you want to say. But it's really a physical. We wrote these things down and checked off which solution was better. And the check mark on the bottom is supposed to be for lowest risk. The incumbent, of course, has been around for decades. So we consider going with a startup more risk. That's why they had won that column. But in every other scenario, Pluribus was by far ahead of the incumbent, particularly with visibility, like I talked about before. When we finally got the solution in and we actually turned it on and looked at the visibility statistics, we learned that we had 1 million flows every 15 minutes going through our data centers. So 4 million flows every hour. It was phenomenal. It shocked us, shocked Pluribus at the same time, but it goes to show you that now with this sort of a solution, we can actually get that kind of visibility, really profound. And then we can actually make decisions based on getting that information now. Just eye candy here, show you what it looks like in our main data center. That one rack with the black and red switches, that's our entire data center network in one rack. And we actually spread out the switches just because we have the space. We own the data center, so it wasn't a big deal. But we put an entire data centers where the switches in a single rack. So power savings, space savings, all those sorts of things come into play to add a big return on investment for us. If we look back over the journey, we'll look back first and then look at what's to come. The good thing is we did not have to do a forklift upgrade. The way we did this is we connected our layer 3 part of our existing network to a layer 3 part of a Pluribus network just to see if we can exchange routes. Then after that, we added a spine and leaf. Okay, can we migrate VLANs over? Okay, the VLANs seem to work okay. All right, let's migrate a server over, one server. Migrate a server over, how's that look? And then we just kept doing this time after time after time until we got comfortable with the solution, got any different design things we needed to get figured out, and then made the whole transition. So if you remember me talking about the timeline, from the time we finally started installing equipment to the time we were done was less than 8 months, the time we would completely replace data center equipment. And just to let you know, we don't have a huge team. While there's 10,000 employees at Steelcase, there's 2 network architects. So me and another guy. We talked about analytics quite a bit. That was a huge benefit for us. There's no design changes since day one. We designed it in about 2 weeks, Lester and I. Very quick design process, whereas we were working months and months with our previous solution trying to get it right and never ended up coming out with what we wanted to. Another big thing is that Pluribus is committed to open standards. That's another thing that our CIO really wants. We don't want to feel like we're locked into a particular brand or a particular hardware platform. Some other things to pay attention to in this sort of situation where you're thinking about moving from traditional networking into SDN is that you have to realize where these, what's offsetting. We know when we virtualize something or clustering something, we add complexity into that part of the network or that part of the system. So that's one thing we need to pay attention to, and that's one thing we paid close attention to, and how do we mitigate those risks? Do those risks outweigh the benefits, et cetera? Another thing, vFlows is a feature that Pluribus has. It's kind of like an ACL on steroids. You can do all kinds of different things, and you can block traffic, you can redirect traffic, all kinds of different things. They take some getting used to. So we had to pay a lot of attention to that. Tweak some rules that we had existing to make sure they work the same way in the new system. And if you haven't noticed, just by being here today, this industry is changing extremely quickly. But VCS enables that change. It helps us get the visibility out of the network. It helps us mitigate when we're moving to AWS, or we have a hybrid cloud where we have front-end servers that are out in the cloud and back-end servers in our private networks. What's actually happening with those connections, with those sessions. And one last thing, those 14 routers that I had to configure, I actually configured them, set them up, had them peered within an hour, so 14 different routers. I couldn't imagine doing that in a hardware solution. Looking ahead, we have Pluribus going into our Munich Innovation Center. It's a new building we just put. It's our hub for all of Europe. That project actually just completed about a week ago. So we have Pluribus in the core, and then we have another vendor as the edge switches. So with Pluribus being in the core and doing all the routing and inter-VLAN routing, we get all the visibility that we could in a full deployment. Second thing is SD-WAN version 2 for us. We've been doing SD-WAN for 2 years already with one vendor. Now we're looking at the next iteration. How can we do it even better, make it easier to use? And branch of the future for us is going to be a big one. We're looking at replacing the entire network stack at our offices, so small offices, so about 80% of our sites. How to replace an access point, a switch, and a router with a company that can provide a single pane of glass for managing that. IoT is enormous for us. We have about 30,000 MAC addresses on our network right now, so different devices worldwide. In 2 years, we think we'll have 1 million MAC addresses. It's going to explode on us, and part of that is our company is driving an IoT product. And then dense Wi-Fi deployments worldwide. So to wrap things up, we have just a couple summary points or suggestions. If you don't have an active POC with an SDN vendor right now, particularly Pluribus, start. You can start small. You don't have to rip everything out. You can get 1 or 2 devices and really start to learn what it means and what value it can bring to your company, which is what's important. It doesn't matter if what we're doing is great. It really matters whether it will fit the needs of your particular company. Also differentiate between the different flavors of SDN. Like I talked about, Pluribus is a distributed OS. There's no separate controller. You can put an OpenStack controller and attach it to the network if you want, but you don't have to. All of the other SDN vendors we looked at the time we started this all had a separate controller, and for whatever reason, we liked the distributed OS a lot better. And then ask really detailed level questions. You know, look underneath the shiny marketing and really ask, how are you doing that? How do you make that feature work? Are you just recycling old protocols and putting a new marketing spin on them? Or are they really something that is adding value to what your network needs, your company needs?